Bonjour! Here we are at Versailles, the great palace of Versailles, all for the French kings, mostly for Louis, various ones of them, and of course for you guys, you might remember Versailles, for the Treaty of Versailles, which is signed in here, 1919. Very, very important place. We'll show you inside very shortly. Right, so we're actually in Versailles. You can see all around the magnificent palaces, etc. And this is the stage in 1919 of obviously the Treaty of Versailles and the meetings. This is all to decide what on earth is going to happen to Germany after the First World War. So you've got here 5 countries that meet together. That is America, Britain, France, Italy and Japan. The thing they had in common is the fact that all of them were the victors of the First World War. They were the ones that are going to decide what to happen. Germany is not invited to this meeting. Russia has just become communist, so they're also not invited. And this is the stage in which to decide really what's going to happen to Europe. And what you've got to understand in 1919, when they meet, January 1919, you've got an incredibly angry set of European people, particularly in Britain, particularly in France, demanding revenge against Germany, demanding compensation, particularly the French. And you've also got the backdrop of America, who have come into the war on the basis of they're going to get rid of democracy, they're going to try their best to outrule it completely. Sorry, get rid of dictatorship, not democracy. And you've got this kind of mix of the people trying to decide what to do. Okay, we'll go inside and we'll see some more. Right, so we're inside. You can see some of the magnificence of the place, all the decorations, sorts of rooms where various individuals would stay during the Treaty of Versailles. Clemenceau of France, Woodrow Wilson of America, David Lloyd George of Britain. These are the places they would stay and have these discussions. So we're in the queue for the Hall of Mirrors currently, right down the end of that corridor. You might be able to see it behind me. So I want you to imagine that I am either David Lloyd George, Woodrow Wilson or George Clemenceau. I'm on my way into the Hall of Mirrors and I'm going to decide what's going to happen at the Treaty of Versailles. If I'm David Lloyd George, then I'm David Lloyd George, then I want to be fairly lenient towards Germany. I don't want to punish them too harshly. I'm worried about them becoming communist in the future. If I'm George Clemenceau, I want revenge and I want to extract as much money from Germany as possible. And if I'm Woodrow Wilson, I want to be lenient towards Germany. Okay, they really didn't want to punish Germany too harshly for fear of making Germany a communist country or making Germany want revenge in the future. Okay, when we get to the end of this corridor, you'll be able to see where that Treaty of Versailles was signed, and I'll talk to you about some of the discussions. Okay, you need to walk with me, yeah? Yeah. As I talk to walk. Okay, ready?
Oh my, yeah, it's filming.
Oh. Right, so, welcome. Here is the magnificent Hall of Mirrors. Now today, as you can see, is absolutely jam-packed with tourists, but I want you to imagine this room being jam-packed full of officials, all sorts of countries here, and this meeting, this area where we're having all these discussions goes on for months. Okay, officials from all sorts of countries are here for 6 months deciding what is going to happen. Deciding, discussing, arguing over all sorts of different things. You've got people that have got maps of Europe that they're literally drawing as they go. And most importantly, you've got discussions taking place between the 3 people I mentioned earlier, Woodrow Wilson, David Lloyd George and George Clemenceau. And they decide, eventually, after 6 months of discussion, that these are the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. And the best way for you to remember it is that LAM acronym. So, land. Germany was 10% of German land was taken off of them at the Treaty of Versailles, including all of their colonies, which was seized basically by the British and the French. And they just added to their empire. Their army is reduced to 100,000, which was seen as a real drastic blow to like German prestige and German views towards their like military, which are really patriotic. Money, £6.6 billion is what Germany had to pay back, which is an enormous sum of money that they simply weren't able to pay. As you know, they tried to pay it off in instalments, and in one particular moment when they didn't pay an instalment, you had the invasion of the Ruhr, and I'll explain that later. And lastly, Germany was forced to take all of the blame for the war. Now, the only time, you zoom this way, only time that a German official would have been here was on the day where they signed the treaty. That is the 28th of June 1919. After 6 months of discussion, after 6 months of arguments, the treaty is handed to them. The German delegates, the new German government of the Weimar Republic, they turn up, they're expecting a nice treaty, they're expecting quite fairness because of the promises from Woodrow Wilson, and then they read the treaty and they're told if they do not sign it, the war will carry on and the war will continue. And that forces the German government's hand. They have no choice but to sign it, and they refer to it as the Diktat Treaty. The dictated treaty. They've got no choice but to sign it at all. And as we know, the consequences are really severe on Germany. Now I want you to imagine that I'm one of the German delegates that's leaving Versailles after signing the treaty. Okay? I'm absolutely furious, and I'm really worried actually about what's going to happen to Germany in the future. And I'm right to be worried. But in the future, what you find is that for the German government, the Treaty of Versailles is incredibly damaging. So the German government is blamed for signing the Treaty of Versailles. They had absolutely no choice, but there is a myth that goes around known as a stab in the back myth. It's not just to do with the treaty, it's to do with the war in general. It's German people believing that it's the government's fault as to why they lost the war and why they had to sign the Treaty of Versailles. So for years, the government is hated. It leads to quite a lot of rebellions in Germany. You might remember some of them. For example, the Kapp Putsch, that happens 6 months after the Treaty of Versailles is signed, led by members of the ex-members of the army. And for years afterwards, it causes significant economic problems. So in 1922, Germany missed one of the payments of the reparations figures. And what it led to is the invasion of the Ruhr by France. Now, in order to try and pay some of that money back, you find the German government have to print money. The French are in the Ruhr just seizing all the goods, and the German government try and get rid of them, print money causing hyperinflation. Now, hyperinflation would never happen without what's signed at this place. Never have taken place. The other thing that it really leads to in the long term is the rise of Hitler. Now, Hitler gained power a lot off the back of the promise to overturn the Treaty of Versailles and get rid of it completely. If the treaty is less harsh, then Hitler doesn't come to power. And if the treaty is less harsh, then World War II also does not start, because all Hitler does, as soon as he takes power, is promise he's going to restore the German land, he's going to stop paying stop paying some of the money, he's going to get rid of all of it, and he reclaims some of the land, takes parts of Czechoslovakia, takes parts of Poland, and ultimately that leads to the Second World War. Now, without this place that you can see here, without the dealings of what happened in 1919, the course of German history would have been incredibly different. And it's really the significance of the place, again, in the background here, that shapes German history for a long time. Okay? Hope you found that useful and informative. Good luck revising.